I couldn't shake the feeling, not for a single moment. It gnawed at me, a constant itch I couldn't scratch, no matter how hard I tried. I kept thinking about how Emily had reacted so suddenly when her phone lit up, like she was caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. But it wasn't just the way she acted, it was the whole situation that was off. And it was driving me crazy. Every time I looked at her, I couldn't stop wondering if she was hiding something. Every time she smiled at me, my brain would wonder, was it genuine? Or was it just a mask? The days that followed felt like a blur of half-formed thoughts and silent suspicions. On the surface, everything was normal. Emily was still Emily, the woman I'd fallen for. The woman I married. But there was something different, something small but significant, creeping in between us. It wasn't obvious, but it was there, just beneath the surface. Like an invisible crack in a perfectly smooth glass, growing bigger with each passing moment, I watched her more carefully now, paying attention to the little things. The way she'd sometimes pause mid-conversation, like she was thinking of something else. Or the way she'd avoid eye contact when I asked her where she'd been, who she'd been with. And then there were the late nights. We used to spend so much time together after work, talking, laughing, just enjoying each other's company. But now, she'd come home later and later. Sometimes barely acknowledging me as she walked in the door. At first, I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe I was tired from work, maybe I was too wrapped up in my own head. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise, something felt wrong. One night, after she came home late again, I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I was proud of. I never thought I'd be the type of person to spy on their partner, but I couldn't ignore the feeling any longer. I had to know what was going on. I waited until she took a shower, and then I quietly grabbed her phone. The instant I unlocked it, I could feel my heart racing. Every second felt like an eternity as I scrolled through her messages, her calls, her social media. There were the usual messages from friends, but then, there it was. A conversation that didn't fit. A thread of messages with a number I didn't recognize, a thread that was too friendly, too personal for just a casual acquaintance. The way they texted each other, it was obvious they were more than just friends. My stomach dropped. The messages were flirtatious, playful even. But it wasn't just that. It was the tone of them, the intimate, private jokes. The way they spoke to each other as if they shared a bond one didn't have with her. And then, there were the times of the messages. Late at night, when I was fast asleep, or when she told me she'd be working late, I was shaking, but I couldn't stop scrolling. The next message made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight," it read. "I'm counting down the minutes until you get here." My heart pounded in my chest. I knew who it was now. It wasn't just some random acquaintance, it was him, it was Matt, the guy she'd met a year ago at a work event, the one I always joked about, the one who always seemed to be just a little too charming, a little too interested. He'd invited her out for drinks a few times before. And every time I had a feeling in my gut that something wasn't right, but Emily always brushed it off. "Oh, he's just being friendly," she'd say, laughing it off. But now, I was staring at the proof that everything I'd suspected was true. She'd been hiding something from me. And the worst part was, she didn't even try to hide it well. The texts were right there in front of me, her entire betrayal laid out in black and white. I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the room seemed to close in on me. I tried to keep it together, tried to keep my composure, but it was impossible. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted with my whole heart, had been sneaking around behind my back with another man. And the worst part was, I had no idea how long it had been going on. I closed her phone and set it down on the table, my hands trembling. The silence in the room was deafening. Every breath I took felt like it was suffocating me. I couldn't stop the thoughts from racing through my head. I wanted to confront her right then and there, demand the truth, but I didn't know how. How could I even begin to process what I'd just discovered? How could I face the woman I thought I knew? The woman I'd spent my life building a future with, when all I could think about was the fact that she'd betrayed me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at her phone, the weight of the truth crushing down on me. I had to confront her. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed more. I needed to know everything. I had to dig deeper. I had to find out exactly how far this betrayal went. The following morning, I felt numb. The world around me was a blur, and I couldn't focus on anything. I went through the motions, getting dressed, grabbing my coffee, walking to the car, but it all felt like I was on autopilot. I couldn't stop thinking about the messages. The more I thought about them, the more I realized how blind I had been, how oblivious to everything that had been happening right under my nose. Every single moment now seemed tainted. Every smile, every conversation, every laugh we shared felt like a lie. I thought about confronting Emily right then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the storm that would follow. I had no idea what I would say, how I would react, or if I could even keep my composure once I confronted her. I needed answers first, concrete proof that I could really face her with the truth. The first thing I did when I got to work was go straight to the bathroom. I locked myself in one of the stalls and sat there, staring at the cold tile floor as the weight of everything pressed down on me. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. There was still so much I didn't know. I had her texts, but what if there was more? What if this was just the tip of the iceberg? I needed to dig deeper. I had to. I called my best friend, Lucas, the only person who knew what was happening. I hadn't told him all the details, just the basics, the things I couldn't ignore anymore. He'd been there for me when I needed someone to talk to, and now I needed him to help me navigate the mess I'd gotten myself into. "Hey, man," I said when he picked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, what's up?" "Can you do me a favor? I need you to help me find out more about Matt, about everything that's been going on with him and Emily." Lucas hesitated for a second. "Are you sure you want to go down that path, bro? I mean, you've already seen the texts, you know what's happening. You don't need more proof." I clenched my jaw. I need more than just the texts. I need to know everything. I need to know how deep this goes. I need to know if there's more that she's been hiding from me. There was a long pause before Lucas spoke again. "All right. But I think you're playing with fire here. If you dig too deep, you might end up regretting it." "I don't care," I said, my voice low. "I can't live with this not knowing. I need answers, Lucas." "Fine," he said reluctantly. "I'll see what I can do. But you need to be ready for whatever you find." I hung up, feeling a little lighter, like I was finally taking some control over the situation. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, pushing me forward. I wasn't just a passive victim anymore. I was going to uncover the truth, and no matter what it took, I was going to make sure I knew everything. As the day wore on, I felt like I was living in a fog. My mind kept returning to the texts, the words that had cut through me like a knife. I couldn't shake the image of Emily and Matt together, their words twisted in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. It was almost like I was in a nightmare. But the worst part was, I couldn't wake up. Lunchtime came and went, and the hours stretched out longer and longer. I barely noticed the passing time. I kept my phone close, waiting for Lucas to call back, but the wait was unbearable. Every second felt like a lifetime. My head was spinning with all the possibilities. What if Emily was in too deep? What if she didn't just love Matt, but was planning to leave me for him? What if I was nothing more than a placeholder, someone she'd stayed with out of convenience until she found someone better? The more I thought about it, the more the doubt crept in. I couldn't trust my own mind anymore. I was questioning everything about my marriage. Every moment I thought had been real. And worse, I was questioning her. The woman I'd trusted, the woman I'd stood by through thick and thin. Was everything just an act? It felt like my whole world was crumbling, piece by piece, and I had no idea how to stop it. No idea how to fix it. All I had was the phone in my hand and the knowledge that Emily had betrayed me. The evidence was right there. The proof was undeniable, but I still needed to know more, and then, finally, around 3:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. Lucas had sent me a message. I felt my heart skip a beat as I quickly opened it. I found something, the message read. You were right. This isn't just about texts. I'll send you the details in a few. I stared at the message for a moment, a sense of dread creeping in. What had he found? What was it going to mean for everything? I took a deep breath and waited. I wasn't ready, but there was no turning back now. The truth was coming for me, and I wasn't sure how I was going to handle it. But I had no choice. I had to face it. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. I opened it. It was a picture of Matt and Emily, together, laughing, holding hands. But it wasn't just that. In the background of the photo, there was something I hadn't noticed at first. It was a hotel sign, blurred in the distance. The photo had been taken at a hotel. And the date on the image? It was only a few weeks ago. The bottom of my stomach dropped out. I stared at the photo, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My mind raced, trying to process the implications of what I had just uncovered. The photo was proof. Proof of what, exactly? That they were more than just friends? That this had been going on for longer than I thought. I felt dizzy, nauseous, like I was about to collapse. But I couldn't look away. The picture was like a puzzle piece that clicked into place, and everything that had seemed confusing, everything that had felt like a distant suspicion, suddenly became clear. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This wasn't a simple flirtation. This was an affair. A full-on relationship. And it had been going on for far longer than I had ever imagined. I dropped my phone onto the desk and buried my face in my hands. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. I couldn't breathe. I had the proof. Now, the hardest part was figuring out what to do next. I couldn't sit still. Every part of me was on edge, my body vibrating with a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could this happen? How had I not seen it? How had Emily, the woman I'd loved, the one I had stood by through thick and thin, managed to pull this off without me even noticing? The image of her with Matt haunted me, spinning in my mind like a broken record. I wanted to scream, to lash out at the world for betraying me like this. But all I could do was sit there, staring at my phone screen, feeling the walls of my world closing in. Lucas's message had sent me into a spiral, and I could feel the weight of it pressing on me with every second. The more I thought about it, the more everything I thought I knew seemed like a lie. I had never once suspected that something like this could happen. Emily and I were supposed to be solid. I thought we had it all figured out. We'd been together for years, we'd survived so much together. How could she have done this to me? The thought of confronting her terrified me, but it also made me sick with anticipation. What would I say? What could I say? I knew I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I couldn't go on living a lie. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the truth, especially when it seemed like the truth was so much worse than I could ever imagine. I couldn't stay at work. The office felt suffocating. The noise of conversations around me like a distant hum I couldn't escape. I had to leave. I couldn't think straight with all of this weighing on me. I stood up and grabbed my coat, not caring if anyone noticed, not caring about anything other than the fact that I had to get out. I couldn't breathe in that space anymore. I drove home in a haze, my mind racing. The city passed by in a blur, the world outside a constant swirl of motion while I sat still, trapped in my thoughts. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every car that passed felt like a reminder that the world was moving on without me, while I was stuck in this hell of my own making, I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. I had no plan, no idea what I was going to do. But I knew I couldn't just walk into the house like everything was normal. I couldn't face Emily without confronting her about what I knew. But what would I even say? How could I even look her in the eye after everything? I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at my skin as I walked up to the front door. I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, before pushing it open. The house felt eerily quiet, like it had been waiting for me to walk in. The silence was deafening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I walked through the living room, the space that had once felt like home now feeling like a stranger's house. I could hear the sound of footsteps upstairs. Emily. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, my heart pounding in my chest. Should I wait? Should I let her come down, let her try to explain herself before I said anything? But I knew I couldn't. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to confront her now. I walked up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silence, each step heavier than the last. The closer I got to the bedroom, the more my heart raced. I was about to face the woman who had torn my world apart. I was about to find out the truth. I stood outside the bedroom door, taking one last breath before I pushed it open. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me, staring out the window. She didn't even seem to hear me come in. For a moment, I just watched her. She looked so peaceful. But it was a calm that only made the betrayal sting more. I wanted to scream at her, to throw the phone in her face and demand answers, but I held back. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I needed to hear her say it. I needed her to admit everything herself. Emily, I said, my voice steady, though it felt like my heart was going to burst. She didn't turn around. We need to talk. She didn't respond, but I saw her shoulders tense. That was enough. I know about you and Matt. I continued, my voice breaking just a little. I could feel the words clawing their way out of my throat. I saw the photo. I know everything. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd said too much. Maybe she didn't even know what photo I was talking about. Maybe I was jumping the gun. But when she finally turned around, her face was pale. Babe. She started, but I cut her off. Don't call me that, I said, my voice hard. Don't pretend like we're okay. You're not okay. You've been lying to me. To both of us. Her eyes flickered with panic, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something resembling fear in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. She said, her voice trembling. Don't. I shouted. Don't make excuses. You've been seeing him behind my back. This isn't something that just happened, Emily. You made a choice. You chose him. And now I'm left here picking up the pieces. I could see the tears in her eyes, and I hated myself for the way I was speaking to her. But I couldn't stop. It all hurt too much. She had torn my world apart, and I was drowning in the chaos of it. I'm sorry, she whispered, standing up slowly. She took a step toward me, but I took a step back. I didn't want her close. Not like this. I don't care, I said, my voice low. I don't want your apology. I want the truth. I want to know how long this has been going on. I want to know everything. She looked down at the floor, her hands wringing together. It's been a while, she admitted quietly. Months. I never meant for it to get so out of hand. I don't know how it happened. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. I wanted to scream, to make her understand the depth of the pain she had caused, but instead, I stood there in silence, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Her words echoed in my mind, over and over again. Months. This had been going on for months. And I had no idea, my chest felt tight as the reality of the situation settled in. There was no going back. Nothing would ever be the same again. I stood there in that suffocating silence, the weight of her confession pressing on my chest, making it harder and harder to breathe. My mind couldn't grasp what she was saying. Months? It had been months, and I hadn't seen a single sign of it. How could I have been so blind, so trusting, so naive? The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls inching closer with every passing second. The floor beneath my feet felt unstable, like the very foundation of my life was crumbling, bit by bit. The air felt thick, as if every word we spoke made it harder to inhale. I wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the same way I was feeling, betrayed. Crushed, utterly destroyed. But I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, watching her, unable to move, unable to think. How had she managed to hide this from me? How had I never suspected a thing? I never wanted to hurt you, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a hesitant step toward me, as if testing the waters, as if she thought I might break if she came too close. But I couldn't let her near me. Not now. Not after everything. I never wanted to hurt you either, I replied, my voice cold, devoid of emotion. But here we are, aren't we? She winced at my words, and I saw her eyes shimmer with tears. But I didn't care. Her tears meant nothing to me anymore. They were just another lie. A way to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. I don't know how to fix this, she said, her voice cracking as she spoke. I don't know how to make it right. Make it right? I repeated bitterly. You can't make this right, Emily. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. You can't just erase the past few months, the time you've spent with him, time you've spent betraying me. I don't know how to look at you the same way anymore. She flinched, and I saw the hurt flash across her face. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the damage she had done. I had given her everything. My trust, my love, my time. And she had thrown it all away for a fleeting affair with someone else. I don't know what to say, she whispered, tears falling freely now. You don't have to say anything, I replied, my voice growing colder with each word. You've already said enough. The truth has come out, and I'm done. I'm done pretending like we can fix this. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with you. Her face crumpled, and I saw her shake her head as if she couldn't believe what I was saying. Please, don't say that, she begged. Please, don't give up on us. We can work through this. I love you. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. I didn't want to hear about love or apologies or how she never wanted this. The truth was, she had chosen him. She had chosen to betray me, to destroy everything we had built. And no amount of tears or empty promises could fix that. You did this, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. You did this, Emily. You made a choice. And now I have to live with the consequences of that choice. I don't want to hear about how you didn't mean to hurt me, because the damage is done. You've taken everything from me. You've taken my trust, my heart, my belief in us. And I can't get that back. She was crying openly now, her body shaking with each sob, but it didn't affect me. Nothing she said, nothing she did, could take away the pain she had caused. I don't know what you want from me, she said between tears, her voice breaking. I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake, I swear. It was just a mistake. I love you. Please, don't leave me. But I already had my mind made up. The weight of everything she had done was too much for me to bear. The trust had been shattered beyond repair. The love I had for her had been tainted, poisoned by her actions. I couldn't stay in this relationship any longer, not when it felt like a lie, not when it felt like I was living in someone else's reality. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said softly, the words coming out like a dagger to my own heart. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She took a step forward, reaching for me, but I backed away. No, I said firmly. Don't touch me. I don't want anything from you. Not anymore. She dropped her hand, her body trembling as she took a step back. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying, but none of it made a difference. Nothing mattered anymore. I don't want this either, she whispered, her voice shaking with grief. I never wanted to hurt you. But I did. And I can't take it back. I stood there, staring at her, and for the first time in so long, I felt nothing. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, they all seemed so distant now, as if they belonged to someone else. The only thing I felt was emptiness. A hollow, aching emptiness that had settled deep in my chest. I know you didn't want to hurt me, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. But you did. And now we have to face the consequences. I turned away from her, the door to our bedroom now feeling like an insurmountable barrier. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in a place that had once felt like home, that had once felt like ours, now filled with nothing but lies and betrayal. I'm done, I said. My voice steady, even though every part of me felt like it was falling apart. I can't do this anymore. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, broken and alone. I understand now, you're looking for a large amount of text in English for the 5th part. Here's a detailed continuation of the story in the same narrative style, focusing on emotions, internal struggle, and deep character development. I could feel my chest tightening, every breath felt like it was getting harder to take, as if something heavy was pressing down on me. The familiar warmth of the house, the place I thought of as our sanctuary, now felt cold and empty. I walked through the door. But it no longer felt like home. It was as if the walls, once filled with laughter and love, had become silent witnesses to a betrayal too painful to even comprehend. I had so many questions swirling in my mind, too many things left unsaid, but none of them could be voiced. How could I ever say what needed to be said? There she was, standing in the kitchen, making dinner as if everything was normal, as if nothing had changed. Her back was turned, and I could see the soft light of the evening reflecting off her hair. For a moment, I almost forgot everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the secret affair. But that was fleeting, a mere illusion. The truth, like an unwelcome guest, always finds its way to the surface. Hey, how was work today? She asked, her voice casual, almost too casual. It was the kind of tone she always used when she wanted everything to feel like it was okay, like it was fine. But I wasn't fine. And I knew she wasn't either. We were two strangers trapped in a web of our own making. I took a deep breath. I had no idea how to approach this, how to start the conversation that had been festering inside me for days. The tension in my chest felt suffocating. I was on the edge, not knowing whether to confront her directly or let her confess on her own terms. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. The anger, the hurt, it was all building up inside me, like a storm that was just waiting to explode. I know what you've been doing, I finally said, my voice hoarse, but steady. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders just by saying it out loud. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and real. For a second, I saw her freeze, her hands pausing in midair. The knife she was holding glinting in the dim light. The smile that had been on her lips disappeared, replaced by a flicker of panic in her eyes. She didn't speak right away. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. And then, finally, she turned to face me, her face carefully blank, but I could see the subtle tremor in her lips. What are you talking about? She asked, but there was no conviction in her voice. It was the kind of question people ask when they know they've been caught, when the guilt is too obvious to hide. But she was still trying, still pretending. I could feel my pulse racing as the truth settled into the space between us. I know about you and Mark, I said, this time with more force, not backing down. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to let her lie to me anymore. Her expression faltered for just a second. I caught it, that brief flash of guilt, of fear, before she quickly masked it with the same indifferent expression she always wore. She took a step back, clearly taken aback by the confrontation, but still unwilling to admit what I already knew. What are you saying? She asked, her voice trembling now. Mark is just a friend. Stop, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. You can't lie to me anymore. I've seen the texts, the messages, the way you look at him. Don't act like I'm blind. Don't act like I haven't been paying attention. The room felt like it was closing in around us. Every word I said seemed to make the walls feel smaller, tighter, more suffocating. I could see her searching for the right words, but she couldn't find any. Her silence was more powerful than any excuse she could offer. You're right, she finally said, her voice softening, but it didn't bring any comfort. I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, you've already hurt me, I said, the anger bubbling up again. You don't get to pretend like nothing's wrong anymore. You've been lying to me, and now you're telling me that you've been seeing someone else behind my back for God knows how long. I saw her eyes flicker with something. Was it regret? Guilt? Or just a desperate attempt to hold on to whatever was left of the life we used to have? It didn't matter. It didn't change the truth. I wasn't angry just because of the affair. No, I was angry because all of this, the lies, the deceit, the years we spent together, had been nothing but a carefully constructed illusion. Everything we'd built was a house of cards, fragile and easily toppled. And she, my wife, had been the one who knocked it down. I had trusted her, loved her, and this was how it ended. I had never imagined I would be here, standing face to face with the woman I thought I would grow old with, questioning everything I knew about love and trust. It was a betrayal of the highest order, one that I didn't know if I could ever forgive. The silence between us felt suffocating, as if the air itself had become thick and heavy with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. I stood there, staring at her, my heart beating a mile a minute, trying to process everything that had just come out. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd spent years building a life with, was standing in front of me, her eyes filled with nothing but regret, and something else I couldn't quite place. It was too much. My head was spinning. Every word she spoke felt like a distant echo, as if the room had suddenly warped into something else, something surreal. She looked so vulnerable standing there, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She wasn't the same person I had married. This version of her felt like a stranger, someone I didn't even recognize. I had been a fool. And the truth burned through me like fire. I had never imagined that this would be the point where everything unraveled. It didn't matter how hard I tried to reason with myself, the facts were in front of me. The lies were too many, too deep, too consuming. There was no turning back. I could feel the rage simmering just beneath the surface. But I couldn't let it explode. Not yet. I couldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control, not now when I had finally mustered the strength to confront her. This moment had been a long time coming, a slow burn that had built up over years of deceit and manipulation. She had played her part in the grand illusion, and now it was time for the truth to take center stage. Her voice trembled as she took a step closer, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I didn't want to hear her apologies. I didn't want her to beg for my forgiveness. It would mean nothing now. She had already broken something inside me that couldn't be fixed. And that void would follow me for a long time. I didn't want this to happen, she said softly, her hands wringing together in the way I'd seen her do when she was nervous. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what happened. It was never supposed to go this far. I'm so sorry, the word sounded hollow. Too late. Too empty. She had said the same thing over and over, and it never felt sincere. Apologies were nothing more than empty words when actions had already proven what she was capable of. "You don't get to apologize anymore," I finally said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of years of frustration. "I don't want your apologies. I want the truth. I want to know why. Why him? Why Mark? What did I do that wasn't enough?" She flinched at the mention of Mark's name, and I saw the smallest flash of guilt pass over her face, like a shadow that couldn't be hidden. She opened her mouth, as if to explain, but nothing came out at first. There were no words that could take back what she had done, no reason that would make sense of the devastation she had caused. There was no justification that could erase the way I felt right now, no excuse that could bring back the trust one once had in her. "I don't know," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wish I could explain it, but I can't. It just happened. I was so lost. I felt like I was living for you, for us, but I was losing myself. I needed something more, something outside of this life. And when Mark came into the picture, I guess I just let it happen, let it happen." I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "You let it happen? You let him into our home, into our bed, and you think that's something you can just excuse with a 'let it happen'? What the hell is wrong with you?" Her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the genuine remorse in them, but it didn't change anything. I couldn't forget the nights I spent lying next to her, completely oblivious to the lies she was living. Every time I had kissed her, every time I had told her I loved her, had she been thinking of him? Had he been on her mind when she had smiled at me? It felt like everything had been a lie, every sweet word, every promise she had ever made. "Please, don't do this," she said, her voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me." I was just confused, lost. I needed something that I couldn't find in our marriage anymore. But I never meant for it to go this far. I couldn't believe it. She was sitting there, spilling her heart out, and still, I couldn't feel any sympathy. How could I? She had chosen him over me, over everything we had built. She had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. The pain was overwhelming, but the betrayal was worse. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the years of lies, the deceit that had poisoned everything. It was about the trust one had given her, the love I had shown her, all of it thrown away for nothing more than a moment of weakness. I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. I couldn't stand the sight of her, the woman I had once loved, now a mere stranger in my eyes. "Don't come near me," I said through gritted teeth. "Don't touch me. You've done enough damage. The truth is out, and now I need to deal with it alone." I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need to hear her try to justify her actions or apologize once again. I couldn't do it anymore. The weight of the lies, the weight of everything she had taken from me, was too much. I had to leave. I had to walk away. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. She called out to me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to save. All that remained was the knowledge that everything I thought I knew about my life had been shattered in an instant, and now I had to pick up the pieces. But no matter how hard I tried, I knew I'd never be the same again. I opened the door and stepped out into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. But it wasn't cold enough to freeze the pain in my chest. That would take a lifetime. The days that followed felt like a blur, a fog of confusion, anger, and sorrow that I couldn't seem to shake off. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the shattered trust, weighed on me like an anchor around my neck. I moved through the motions of life, but nothing felt real anymore. I no longer knew who I was. The man I thought I was, the man I used to be, was gone. That version of me had died the moment I found out the truth. And in his place was someone broken, someone who no longer believed in love, in trust, or in anything that once seemed so solid and real. I spent my days at work, my mind constantly drifting back to her. No matter how much I tried to focus, I couldn't help but replay the scene over and over in my mind. Her face, her words, the look in her eyes when I walked out the door, it all felt like it was haunting me. She had shattered everything in an instant, and I couldn't understand why. Why would she do this to me? Why would she betray everything we had built? She had been the center of my world, and now she was nothing more than a ghost, a shadow of the woman I had once loved, but the worst part was the guilt that gnawed at me. I had tried to be a good husband. I had tried to give her everything, to make her happy, to support her in every way I knew how. I had trusted her with my heart, my soul, my life. And yet, in the end, it hadn't been enough. It was as if I had failed her, failed our marriage, and failed myself. The doubt crept in slowly, at first. Maybe I wasn't enough for her. Maybe I wasn't what she needed. Maybe I had been too blind, too caught up in my own world to see that something was wrong, but no matter how many times I asked myself those questions, no matter how many times I replayed our life together in my mind, I couldn't find the answer. It wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. It was hers. She had chosen this. She had chosen him. And nothing would ever change that. The hardest part was seeing her every day, even if it was just for a few minutes. She still lived in our house. She still moved through the same spaces we had shared for years, but everything felt so different now. It was like we were strangers, two people who no longer knew each other, whose history had been erased, whose bond had been shattered beyond repair. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand the silence that hung between us like a thick curtain. I couldn't stand the way she looked at me, as if she still expected me to forgive her, to take her back, to somehow make everything okay. But I couldn't. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. There was no forgiveness for what she had done. No easy way out of this pain. Every time I saw her, I saw him. I saw the man who had taken everything from me, who had stolen my wife, my love, my life. I couldn't look at her without feeling the rage boiling up inside of me. But I couldn't confront her anymore. I couldn't deal with her broken apologies, her pleas for forgiveness. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. The trust was gone, the love was gone, and all that was left was the wreckage of what once was. The weeks dragged on, and I became a shell of myself. I stopped talking to my friends. Stopped going out, stopped living. I just existed. I kept my distance from her, kept my emotions bottled up inside, refusing to let anyone see how much I was hurting. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want anyone to pity me. But the truth was, I was falling apart. Inside, I was shattered. The man I had been was no longer there. He had been destroyed by the betrayal. I had been destroyed, and then one day, when I was at the lowest point of my life, something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep drowning in my pain, my anger, my guilt. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let this break me. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to make a change. I had to reclaim myself. I had to let go of her, of the past, of everything that had hurt me. I started going to therapy. I started working through the pain, the anger, and the confusion. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't easy. But slowly, day by day, I began to heal. I started to rebuild myself, piece by piece, even though it felt like I was starting from scratch. The hardest part was facing the truth, that everything I thought I knew about love, about relationships, about myself, had been turned upside down. But in the end, I realized that I was stronger than I thought. I had survived this. I had made it through the darkest time of my life, and then one day, I looked in the mirror and realized that the man staring back at me wasn't the broken man who had walked away from her all those months ago. He was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who had learned that love wasn't about giving everything you had to someone else. It was about loving yourself first. It was about knowing your worth and never settling for less than you deserved. I hadn't come out of this unscathed. I hadn't come out of this without scars. But I had come out of this. And that was something she could never take away from me. In the end, she lost more than I did. She lost herself. And as much as it hurt to let go, I knew it was the right thing to do. I had to walk away. I had to let her go. And as I stepped into the future, into a life where I wasn't defined by her betrayal, I knew that I would be okay. I would heal. I would move on. And no matter what, I would never allow myself to be anyone's second choice again.